I'll turn it over to you, Pat.
Thank you. It's good that some of you can join us this evening, and I'm hoping it'll be just an informal chat. And Peggy, I certainly understand that picking up your granddaughter is far more important. Tonight I wanted to get down and dirty about the nitty-gritty of how I prepare presentations and speeches, because I think it might make it a little easier for you if you pick up some of these techniques. They've certainly worked for me. Many of you know that I was the Parks and Recreation Director for the city of Watsonville for quite a long time. I'm getting this got it thing in, there we go. And it was important that I know about the city council and the kind of information they wanted. Were some of them numbers people? Were some of them just, you know, what's good for the community is good for me kind of thing? And in knowing my audience, I would prepare my presentation and recommendations accordingly. I can remember one dear lady, Betty Murphy, her name was, and she really wanted the numbers. And after she read the reports, which went out usually the Friday before the Tuesday meeting, she would often come in and talk to me about that report and want to get down and dirty about the numbers. So it didn't take me long to figure out how to deal with Betty in particular. And with some others, it was the same. They either wanted numbers or they just wanted to hear the justifications. And sometimes they wanted an alternate recommendation. And that was kind of hard because, you know, you're pushing for this one recommendation and you had to sell another one. So again, knowing my audience was important. As a community college trustee, speaking at the board in terms of supporting staff in terms of their recommendations, or the college president in terms of something like a 20% reserve, which wasn't necessarily the desire of the faculty, but it has kept the college solvent. Those are the kinds of sticky situations you can get into. And again, knowing your audience is important. I'm a student of public speaking, and I like to hear others speak or go to presentations about public speaking because I learned so much, and I'm going to share that with you tonight, I hope. When I start to prepare a presentation, I often say to myself, well, what do I know about this topic? Who or what can I find out more about the topic if I don't have a thorough understanding? And then what do I want my audience to know? What's important to them? I typically, when I'm starting a presentation, including the one tonight, start with a very plain notebook, a pencil, and I like to do it this way because somehow writing by hand helps me create. I don't do as well creating on a computer. My work is transferred to a computer, but I like the pages. I can take it with me wherever I go. And frankly, most of this was written, at least the initial draft, while I was waiting in the Subaru lobby waiting for my car to be serviced. Again, I like the portability. As I draft my thoughts in my outline, my page is set with a 2-inch margin. And I want to show you it. It's not pretty, and you may not be able to see it in its entirety, but see that there's a right hand backwards. 2-inch margin. I've got notes on one side, and my page number is right up here at the top in big letters, so I don't lose the thought if I get them all mixed up. For ease of presentation, I make sure that each page ends with a complete sentence. That way you're not flipping your page or sliding your page because you've got to complete that sentence. It's just easier, even if it leaves a little extra paper at the bottom, to end it with a complete sentence. I want to tell you another thing about this 2-inch margin, because as I look at Jan, we're preparing to do our Zoom Live Your Dream Awards on the 27th. And she said, I will send you a script. Oh man, I love that when she sends me scripts. But when I print them, I also leave this 2-inch margin available to me because Jan doesn't necessarily know that we may have a guest that was unexpected. And I want to mark it down on my page so I won't forget to introduce them. Or there's some other order, or I can't pronounce that name, so I have to do it phonetically. Again, that 2-inch margin just gives you so much room to deal with the unexpected often at times. So I recommend it to you. If you're preparing a PowerPoint, I attended a discipleship ministries program on Tuesday night that was having to do with church audit. And I have to tell you that every single slide was read by the presenter. And I felt like saying, well, why did you just send them to us? And you know, we could have been done with this 45-minute presentation and just ask questions.
What time do you think we should leave?
So make sure that your PowerPoint is an outline so that you can present the details as a speaker. Bye, Peggy. Once I have gotten the language, I think, finalized, I transfer it to the word processor. And again, I leave that necessary 2-inch margin. I don't know about the rest of you, but I use a 16-point font. That way I don't have to wear my glasses. I wear readers. And when I wear readers and I'm at the podium, I can see my print, but I can't necessarily see the audience because you're all a blur with readers. That said, I can remember when we used to wear the granny glasses and we'd be hanging them on the end of our nose and we'd be doing this. So make the print as large as you can at your comfortable level and see if you can get away with not wearing your readers or your glasses. There's 3 essential speeches for Seroptimists that I think we could talk about. One is the introduction. A second is a thank you or a praise moment, which is really important. And finally, it's giving or accepting an award. It's my belief that everyone deserves an introduction. Now, tonight's rather informal. Most of you know me personally, and it wasn't necessary. On the other hand, if I am a guest in another club, I would expect a brief introduction. I'm not one that wants these lengthy introductions to tell you how much I've been in Seroptimists, et cetera, et cetera. You know, past governor, past SIA president is fine. That's all. But make sure that when you're introducing someone to your club, you want to make sure that people understand your credentials. Why are they coming? If they're the executive director of the food bank, you might want to know a little bit more about them. Give them a call, give their secretary a call, find out if they have a preferred bio. Some do. Again, if it's a person you know well, you might want to call them up and say, hey, Judy, I want to do a nice introduction. What would you really like me to say about you? And do it that way, but do an introduction. I can remember I was asked to speak at Rotary by a dear friend of mine, the police chief, and I was going to be talking about some recreation programs and we had a bond issue coming up. And good old Terry, with whom I've presented millions of times, gets up and said, here's Pat Donohue. Well, not all the Rotarians knew who I was. And they certainly didn't know that perhaps that I was the Parks and Recreation Director and been there for 15 years or whatever. Anyhow, it's important for sometimes that your credentials be established, and that's why I think an introduction is important. Enough about that. It's just kind of a pet peeve that I wanted to share with you. Now you'll be afraid to say hello to me because you figure you'll need an introduction or something. Please don't do that.
Thanks for letting me off the hook.
Not a problem. As I said, there are times when it's not essential, and I don't think there's one person on this group tonight that doesn't know me and has shaken my hand or given me a hug when I needed it. Another quick, vitally important speech is the thank you or praise moment. It's short, it's sweet, but it's specific. Let me give you an example. You just had a wonderfully successful fundraiser, as SI Watsonville did with our gala, and your chair did an outstanding job. You want to recognize that member at the very next club meeting after the event. And hopefully you sent out an email, broadcasted to all the club members, again, complimenting her and the committee. But when you're doing it in person, you want to state how the event was particularly successful. So you made 100%, 110% revenue over last year, for example, something phenomenal. You want to talk about how she created the decor and the atmosphere. You want to share accolades about her talents. Authentic praise is specific. That's what differentiates praise from flattery. It's very specific. If other committee members were involved, mention them too, because they'll feel miffed if they're left out. Again, your 2-inch margin, if you forget names in your presentation page, you can write them down on the margins. Thanks and praise are so important to the health of our club, and that's why I believe they really need to be done frequently. Giving an award to a Live Your Dream award winner. We all know that this award is often the very first public recognition these gals have received. More and more that comes to mind when I've heard our Live Your Dream awardees speak, not only at club, but at region meetings. It's the recognition often that's just as important as the money. Make your introduction warm and welcoming. Share just a bit of their biography with your audience, but let the winner share her story. I've seen Seroptimus basically upstage the honoree by not leaving them anything to say about themselves. So again, short, sweet, warm, and welcoming. You're presenting another type of award to a community or club member. Be generous in your praise, but be brave. Share specific reasons why a person deserves the award. And use an anecdote from the person's life to make the speech personal. You might talk about an incident that you shared together, for example. If you're accepting an award, thank the giver. Acknowledge others who helped you gain the recognition. Explain what the award will mean to you and your club and its positive values, and then thank the award winner, the giver again. This is typical of, for example, if you'd be so lucky as to have your club recognized by the Chamber of Commerce. Think of that kind of a venue. Again, I would write something down, even if it's on a 3x5 card, because you don't want to forget some important folks, or you might want to mention how the community has supported you. And typically in those kinds of situations, if you don't, I mean, even Academy Award winners bring up something to read while they're accepting their Oscar, right? You can tell those that have practiced and those that haven't. We all know how to get to Carnegie Hall. Practice, practice, practice. I'm not suggesting that you memorize your presentation, but knowing the order, using those key word notations on your 2-inch margin, for example, will make for presenting smoother. Let me share an example I read just recently in Michelle Obama's The Light We Carry book. I don't know how many of you have read it, but she talks about preparing months in advance for a major speech she was going to do at the 2008 Democratic Convention. It was when she and Barack were just starting out in their public life and running for office. She was introduced by her brother Craig, and she really was excited about that, because she felt, he was going to be the cheerleader that she needed just before she went out there. And this was a long speech, word for word, memorized it, knew the order perfectly. So she's about to be introduced. Ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to introduce my little sister and the United States next First Lady, Michelle Obama. And she's out there and she's looking for Craig, and they embrace each other, and she's thinking, "Go get him, girl," is what he's going to say. And he said, "The left prompter is out." And then he walks off. She gets to the podium, and sure enough, the left prompter is out. Now, if you've ever used a prompter, those are wonderful things. You got to time them correctly and make sure that you're reading at the pace, and hopefully that the technician is also understanding the pace that you're reading. At any rate, the left one's out. That leaves her the right one. Now, the middle screen is way above up, but you can read it. Except in their infinite wisdom, because the long, skinny signs that they used to use at convention were hitting each other in the heads, et cetera, they decided to make their signs vertical. So she was faced with a sea of long vertical signs that basically hid the prompter straight out there. So she said, "I'm so glad that I had my speech practiced, practically memorized," because she said with just the left prompter, she said it could have set me back a ways. I found, people have dropped their speech just before they reach the podium. That's why if my 8 pages were to fly away and those big numbers are up at the top right, it would certainly be a little bit easier than putting it together again. Tips, tricks that help us work well together at the podium. At any rate, a few tips about the podium. I think I remember one of my first presentations at Seroptimus, and it was when I was the Youth Citizenship Award winner chairperson, I should say. And I have to tell you, I practiced my speech. Poor Sue Bloom heard more about my speeches before every conference if I had to do presenter. But somebody heard me, listened to me, and understood that when I was speaking, if words didn't flow together, she said, "You got to change that." So we were editing orally, which is important. That's why you read your speech, not just with your eyes, but you start reading it and you start saying it. Because sometimes that beautiful prose you created just doesn't flow, or it's a tongue twister, as it turns out to be. Again, practice makes perfect. If you are at the dais already and are going to speak, that's nice because you can just take your papers up quietly to the podium. If you're away from the podium and coming from the floor, I recommend that you actually put your speech in a presentation folder. It just looks a little more professional. I used to, if I could, put mine under the podium and let the chair of the meeting know that it was there so they wouldn't walk off with it. But then I didn't have to carry it. Remember that you are watched from the moment you're introduced to the point in time when you sit down. As a Federation board member, we were often told and coached about presenting. And one of the things they said is, as you approach the podium, it's not the time for sidebars, nor after when you say, "Oh, thank God that's over." Just one of the tips that the Federation taught us. The other thing we had to learn was to speak at 80% of normal timing. Again, for interpreters to catch up with us, and those whose language was not English, but were trying to learn English, it would just give them a little more time to catch up. It's important that you know how to adjust the microphone, and I used to sneak in before meetings if I could and figure that out, because if you're following a 6'2" speaker and you're 5'2", it isn't going to work. So I remember how to do that. And sometimes that arm kind of thing that supposedly hangs in front of you really is an obstruction. And there were times, frankly, when I took the microphone off of the stand and just handheld it. I'm typically more comfortable when I'm speaking in some of my favorite colors. It's an ego thing, I admit it. If I'm wearing blue and I'm trying to sell somebody, a refrigerator in Alaska, blue brings out the blue eyes and it just helps you look more sincere. Yellow happens to be my favorite color, but it's not necessarily one that shows sincerity as well as blues do. Blues and turquoises are probably my best colors. And you find that out because people often compliment you when you're wearing something that looks really good on you. And if you hear that, take it as a cue. If you know someone in the audience as you're approaching the podium or even before your speech, like if Janice were in the back of the room, I would say, hey, Janice, if there is a time when you can't hear me, would you please raise your hand and wave? That way I can adjust my own volume a little bit. And I appreciate that. One of my favorite speakers was Arch Lusberg, and he used to present at the League of California.
Oh,
Uh-oh.
oh dear.
It's okay. Let's see. Things happen.
Keep hoping she'll unfreeze.
I wonder if she knows that she's frozen.
I just told her.
Oh, okay.
Probably talking to us. Oh, she's gonna come back.
While we're waiting, I agree with her about people reading their PowerPoint.
So annoying.
I can read, thank you.
I have a lot of pet peeves about public speaking. And that is a big one.
Yeah, paraphrase it, hit the highlights, but don't read it verbatim. And I laughed when she said 16 point. Mine's closer to 20.
I'm having to increase mine because I do have that problem with the
Yeah.
resources and like I just can't see the audience then. And so I think the last one I did was like 24.
I don't feel so bad.
I didn't want any doubt about being able to read it. And like triple spaced and yeah.
At least you can do it that large and still read it. I can't. I have to have my
You have to,
glasses.
yeah.
Regardless, yeah.
Uh-huh.
I wear glasses all the time, but
I mean,
don't
if I
have to.
could wear my glasses and see, I'd be fine, but I can only, it's just reading glasses. So yeah, it's awkward.
And mine are bifocals.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Assuming she's working her way back.
She's giving great tips as far as leadership types of communication skills, where you're
Yes.
making big presentations on a stage and using equipment and all of that. A lot of times our communication workshops are just sort of our little small venues of meetings and that kind of thing. But this is really taking it to a new level.
Yeah. I was at a event last Friday evening. It was a teen poetry slam, which I love. And so they just come stand in front of the mic. They have nothing else. And so it's not a podium, it's just a standing mic. And what they did is they had like one stage crew type person. They just switched the mic out with every speaker. So she backstage was measuring it for the right, because they go in a random order and they don't know what order they're going in. And so they like find out when they're next, like on deck. And I thought it was so effective because it wasn't this constant trying to adjust the mic. They just they just rotated it each time, and it was so much more efficient, and I hadn't seen that before, so I thought that was cool.
Does anyone need to let her in?
I
know-
did let her in
Oh, okay.
Hi there.
twice. Hey, Pat.
Yay, welcome back.
Sorry, we lost internet connection up here, so.
Oh, no. Okay,
You
you're
were
back.
just telling us about the man that is your favorite speaker.
Yeah.
You said his name.
Yes, Arch Lesford.
That was it.
He also reminded, he was great about helping you deal with the press and kind of in your face questions about when did you stop beating your wife, etc. I've mentioned him before, but one of the things he always told the ladies was the higher the stage, the longer the skirt. Yeah. I think we've seen examples of that in our Sir Optimus conferences and conventions as well. Another tip that I think is important and I like to pass along is that if you get cotton mouth before you're going to go up to the podium, grab a sugar packet, tuck a little something sweet, and it'll get the juices going again. Once you're at the podium, thank the speaker for the introduction, take a deep breath, look around, smile, and then hook them with your opening. When you have your pages, and again, I find this the easiest, and again, remember that I have my right hand margin with large page numbers handwritten so that they're that thick. All you need to do after you finish page 6, for example, is slide page 7 on top, and then you can go directly to page 8. It's a little easier than trying to flip pages. We've all seen that. And again, just an example that works for me. Some speakers need to hang on to the podium. I can remember some of my first speeches in a variety of places, and I had a death grip on the podium. It took me a while to let go with at least one hand. And eventually, again, with practice, I got to 2 hands. And then I finally decided, well, I'm going to try walking around. That's when I would perhaps take the mic off the stand and walk around. But then I found I was pacing, which is just a sign of nervousness. So I had to practice going from the podium to the left, stopping, and all the while you're speaking, but you're going to make eye contact with someone on the left and finish your sentence or 2, move back to the center, sentence or 2 or whatever, 3 or 4, a whole paragraph or a whole page, and then go to the left. You're going to do the same thing and make contact so that you're actually purposefully moving, not moving back and forth. Pacing just indicates nervousness. So you want to, again, make your walk away from the podium purposeful. The other thing that I think is important in our presentations is to pause once in a while. Let's just say you're getting cotton mouth, for example, during your speech and you need a drink of water. Have one ready. Make sure it's not ice water because ice water tends to tighten up the throat. So I want room temperature water. Take a sip, step back, take a sip, and then go back to the podium. It's going to seem like it's going to take you minutes to do that. It doesn't. And again, it gives the audience a chance to catch up with your thought process. Let them have a moment to digest what you said. If you wear a portable mic, make sure you've got a place for it to clip on. Some folks have gotten some of these most beautiful outfits, but there's no place to clip the mic. And then they have to pinch or something. So make sure you've got a spot for that. Well, despite the interruption, and isn't that something that could happen to all of us? We have an interruption and the internet goes down. But thanks to Jan, who said, Pat, you were at Arch Lesford. We got right back on track. So that's my nitty gritty. I hope that sharing, a few of these techniques will help you develop your own. I do know that practice makes perfect. And I hope, as I leave you with these two important tricks and points, that you'll really take these to heart. Never take your audience for granted. And the experience of presenting brings mastery. Let me remind you that I continue to be a student of public speaking, and I continue to practice. Seroptimus has afforded me a wonderful venue to practice this art. And I look forward to hearing many of you make presentations in the future. Now, what questions might I answer for you?
I have a question. So
Yes, Jan.
while you were away, we were discussing amongst ourselves. And Janice and I were, concurring on the horrible habit of reading PowerPoint slides. And so my question is, when you are using a PowerPoint and it's maybe behind you, and you're not really reading it, but you need to refer to it so often. And so it's kind of this awkward kind of side thing or turn. I mean, do you have any recommendations around managing that? Or maybe
Yes.
you don't need to look at it if you know this, I don't know.
I haven't done a PowerPoint in a long time simply because there's two things that I hate about PowerPoints. Number one is that some people put, as I said, too much information on them and they're unreadable, or they take away the attention from the speaker. And I think the speaker is the more valuable resource than the PowerPoint. But I used to print the PowerPoint pages, not the huge ones, but like the 3, so that I had some inkling of what the print was, what the PowerPoint was, but then I had my own comments to read. So that might be a technique that you might try to use.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think that in a large setting, there can be a detractor. And at the same time, we get these PowerPoints from SIA that we're supposed to be presenting, and it's
sometimes a handout is frankly better than a PowerPoint.
Okay, I like that idea. Thank you,
Debbie.
How do you? What do you do when people won't be quiet? We have our fundraiser, and there's usually about 200 women in a room. And when I try to give my introduction and welcome them, I like to try and tell them what their money goes for, why they're doing it. Have one of our Live Your Dream ladies talk, because that's always impressive. But there's always those 1 or 2 tables that just keep talking, and I find that very rude. I wasn't raised that way. How do you, with short of saying, shut up? I mean, how do you? Which is what I want to say. But
would the ladies at table 18 please stop talking? Yeah.
Debbie, there's 2 things you might try, especially in a crowded room of 200 women. God forbid.
Yes.
Yeah, they are going to talk.
I know.
You might have spotters that you can signal and ask if they would go to the table. I trust you're using a microphone.
Yes.
One of the things that we did once was actually clap your hands and say, clap 3 times if you can hear me. And then we said that 2 or 3 times, and it finally got the room quiet. So any trick, go back to Girl Scout days and some of those that we used to try there. But I think the spotter that you can just say, hey, Nancy, would you go over to table 12 and, or send her a note or something. Just make hand signals. Rather than you having to take the brunt of that, just say, have someone go over and say, our speaker is really trying to make some introductions, and I think you would appreciate them.
Yeah, it's not a long talk. I mean, I introduce our, the special people that are there, tell them what we're, just maybe at the most 10 minutes. That's with introducing people.
Yeah.
So, and we do it before they start drinking wine. I can't even imagine what it would be like after that.
I was gonna say, Debbie, you might also have, because I know what you're talking about, because I was there.
Yeah.
You might also have like a really obvious, we're gonna start now. It could be you play a song overhead or something that kind of breaks the transition from this social time to
Yeah.
now we're gonna start talking. There could be all kinds of things that you might have to trigger, signal to the audience. We're gonna be
do
starting in
something
2
now.
minutes or something that might help.
Yeah, no, we have a new auctioneer this year. He's a really good guy. I think he's going to bring a different energy to the room, and I think he could get their attention. I'm hoping. So yeah, it's just very frustrating.
And
when
maybe
you're-
you work in tandem with him.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right, thanks.
Any other questions? Okay, I bet you some of you are getting hungry.
And thirsty.
And
I do have a comment though before I break into the bottle. For dinner. I'm sorry, dinner.
I'll be down in about 45 minutes, Jan.
You just
Yeah.
rush on down, girl.
Yeah, Jan's one of those people I'm talking about.
I found out at the president's roundtable how many times did Gail tell me to shut up? Jeez.
Oh, that's right. That did happen.
Yeah, it sure did. First time it's ever happened. Anyway, that aside, Pat, one of the things that we were talking about when you were offline and getting back on is that what we really appreciated about this talk was that you are taking public speaking to the next level right now. It's not just like, well, when you're talking to your club and blah, 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 but you're talking about real leadership types of public speaking, things that you can do with larger groups, things that you do in the community. And all of it, we were all agreeing that, boy, these are just really wonderful, wonderful tricks and wonderful methods that you're teaching us. So thank you for that.
oh, thank you. But do understand, I took a Dale Carnegie class. Every time Arch Lustberg spoke, and that was once a year at a conference, I went and listened to him. I mean, I've really, as I said, I've been a student of public speaking. So I want to share these tips with you.
That's much appreciated.
Yes, it
Very
is.
much,
Thank
yes.
you. It was
Yeah.
outstanding.
Thank you.
Can
Pat.
I ask you a question that's not really public speaking, but
Sure.
using a microphone? I'm in basically it's a quilt guild. And so we're not professionals, but people never want to use the microphone. And so how do you convince people? They say, oh, I can talk loud. No, you can't, but, or they put it up and then they start talking like this. So
It takes practice. And I think part of the fear, and let me tell you, when Judy sent out her email, I kind of got a kick out of the fact that, are you afraid of public speaking? I've told my minister that I will do all kinds of things in church, but never give a sermon. That's my worst fear. Again, I'd rather be taught me as opposed to the eulogy part.
Okay, Pat, we lost you for a little bit.
Okay. With microphones, I think it's a practice situation when you're trying to encourage others to use it. I think the best reason for them to use the microphone is because not everyone can hear them without it.
Yeah.
Despite the fact that they think that they can, talk loudly enough, nuances are missed. It's just better. Perhaps one of your programs is a training on how to use a microphone, Janice.
I actually have thought of that maybe 1 month, that would be our whole meeting is just how do you use a microphone? So
have everybody do a 2-minute talk on something they love or how to do something that they do using the microphone.
Yeah.
At Dale Carnegie, we didn't use a microphone because we were in a small classroom, but we did have to do particular topics within 2 minutes. It's amazing how people spoke rapidly, almost too fast sometimes. Again, watching your speed is important, particularly when using a microphone as well. So
That's
The
good.
other thing
That's
that
a
I
good-
have to practice, as you notice, is I move my head around a lot. I'm not necessarily stayed at the podium, so I have to practice sometimes doing that.
I was gonna say on the mic, I mean, I get this a lot because everybody always tells me I'm quiet, and I am, and I know this, so I'll always take a mic. But one thing I learned is that I hear myself, and I think this is true of everybody. You hear yourself a lot differently than other people, and as I have a lot of sinus issues and stuff, and so I could be talking really loud. Like I know I'm making an effort to talk really loudly, and still people can't hear, and it's because I hear myself more loudly than other
Mhm.
people. And so I remind people of that when they think, I don't need a microphone. Like you think you do, but you might, so I agree. It's always best, because then there's that one person and they're going to interrupt you every time and say, I can't hear you. And that just becomes super disruptive.
Yeah.
Judy, again, go back to the, if you can't hear me, would you just please raise your hand?
Yep. I like the idea of having someone prepared to help you with that.
Mhm.
Kind of plan it ahead of time, or as you're walking up and spot someone, I like that suggestion.
I remember one time administering a test to 8th grade students, incoming 8th graders. And even though it was a small confined room, I used a microphone and I almost whispered into the microphone, but they could all hear me. And it just kind of calmed them down, like, oh my gosh, here we are at the big high school, and it's like, everything's calm, this is fine. And I just talked very quietly, but
Mhm.
by using a microphone, they could hear.
Right. And actually, again, in a room with a lot of people, it's better to use the microphone because you don't have to yell, and you're not yelling at people, you're talking with people.
Right.
Of course, public speaking is the #1 fear for everyone. So
Right. Yeah. And you've always heard me say the comment about most people, if they're at a funeral, would rather be in the coffin than giving the eulogy.
that's probably true.
Yes.
Yeah.
Janice, I wanted to I had a little time doing some radio a few years back. And I actually learned this in business classes when we were learning how to run offices and all of that. We all have different voices at different times. And grabbing a microphone is almost like taking a telephone call. You use that voice. We all have different voices. And so if you have people practice using a mic, as you said, you were almost down to a whisper. And it worked, and it was comfortable for you, and it worked for your audience. Those are the kinds of things you want to practice. The distance of the mic. You don't want, as we used to say, pea poppers. You're spitting into a mic. You don't want to do that. So you can they could practice their distance, and then also at what range they want to speak. What's the most pleasant range? It's not going to be way up here really fast. It's going to be something that's slow and a little bit low to get across.
And I also appreciate what Pat modeled today was pausing between thoughts instead of people that just read the whole thing through. And it's like, wait a second. Oh, we've moved on to something else, and you can't keep up.
Yeah.
Pauses are important.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Jan, I had an interesting issue come up at a radio station. I had to go over for the department. We had a special event coming up, and somebody had arranged for me to do a 20-minute spot on the radio. So I met the fellow, and he said, okay, let's go. And so I frankly read the entire thing. And he said, okay, you're going to have to cut something because you went over by 25 seconds. You went over by 5 seconds. And I said, I don't want to cut anything. Just let me do it again. So I sped up just a wee bit and made it within the time frame. He said, I've never had anybody do that. And I said, well, it's learning how to, speed up and slow down with your voice. I look at auctioneers, my goodness.
Exactly.
Yeah.
True.
The other thing that I was told at Federation Board, and just a tip for some of you, as you go in front of conference, for example, and or on Zoom, I was told I had to be instructed. I had to wear a brighter lipstick because particularly when I was in Taiwan speaking in front of 2,000 people being videotaped, Lee Wentz, bless her heart, told me, she said, Pat, they can't see your lips. It just you're pale. You've got to darken up your makeup. And then I learned that in Japan, if you're at a banquet or something, it's wholly improper to put lipstick on. So I would see gals that were putting lipstick on and going up and speaking. We were told as Federation board members not to do that. So I got introduced to Revlon's 18-hour lipstick, that stuff that stays on forever. And that saw me through some of those long banquets in Japan.
Wow.
Interesting.
That is
Yeah.
interesting.
And Pat, what was it? It was the color. If your lips weren't dark enough or there wasn't enough contrast, they weren't
They
paying
weren't
attention.
dark enough. And then some people were having, if you have, for example, an interpreter who's reading lips, believe it or not, they can't see your lips as well.
Right.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Buy stock in
Makes sense.
Revlon.
Boy. Oh my.
Well, Pat, I want to tell you that I put all these meetings out in our Sunday updates, and I say, I'm going to go to this one, and then I forget. And this time I happened to go back to my Sunday update this morning, getting set up for next week. And it was like, oh my gosh. So I looked over to my phone and set an alarm for 6:15. so that
Bless
I
you, Janet. Thank
forget.
you.
Good for you.
I appreciate it, Janice. Janice and I have worked together over a number of years, starting way back with the old Seroptimus Sierra Pacific Region Foundation Board.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Wow.
That was an interesting times.
I bet.
And I think Nancy Cardwell has been a conference coordinator since George came home to Martha,
Mhm.
and always
You're
does a
right.
wonderful job.
Thank you. I'll second that.
And she's always
Well,
running.
Governor-elect, shall we bid each other adieu?
We will. Let me turn off the recording and then.